You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible.
For Roland's Still Seeking Freedom segment this week, we are joined.
Our understanding of sex and sexuality, even our responses as Black men to sex and sexuality and ideas of sex and sexuality even today. And I think one of the things that's important about it is the ways in which the Black male body was used sexually. I think we have not really explored that as a phenomenon during enslavement. And I think it's extremely important that we do that, because without doing that, we will not fully understand the assault that Black men endured and the assault that Black masculinity and Black manhood sustained. And I remember being particularly excited about this topic because I had read the narrative of Linda Brent, wherein Harry Jacobs talks about this young man named Luke. And I remember just being really frozen by the way she spoke about how this white man treated him and had even tied him to a bed and quote unquote made him perform unnatural acts, made him do things unspeakable. And I began to look at and began to think about the coded language in which sex and sexuality was talked about in the 18th and 19th centuries. And I began to think about the silences around Black male exploitation that I think has been perpetuated from enslavement to this day. And so I'm very much interested in uncovering and speaking those silences in order that we might begin to get the kind of healing that I think will allow us to be fathers and husbands and brothers to the degree that we have always wanted to be.
Yeah, it's interesting, Dr. Black, it's interesting, Dan, as we think about this, as you play this out, what form would those types of healings take place? I think about that because, of course, around the country and around the world your work has traveled, but you are based in Atlanta, and there in the Atlanta University Center, and having taught your work and having, know your impact on students, you see Tyler Perry open this new theater, this new complex there in Atlanta, the biggest one there is. But I mean, how do these popular images, and I'm thinking, of course, about not only Medea, but the questions of sexuality in Black popular culture today, how much of that can we attribute to the impact of how we think about sexuality coming out of the traumas of enslavement?
I think we contribute probably most of it to that, because I think we're really in the age of a kind of hyper masculinity, or it swings the other extreme, and that is a hyper femininity. And I want to say, I think there is a toxic masculinity, but I think there's a toxic femininity also. And I think there's a way in which understanding masculinity at either extremes is a distortion. When you think about popular media today, I think the thing that's driving popular media and popular culture and popular images of Black men more than anything is really hip hop. But I think hip hop has images and notions of manhood and masculinity that are extremely dangerous to and for us as a people. Some of them are wonderful, and there's some amazing hip hop out there. But there's also some very popular notions of manhood and masculinity around this notion of sex and sexuality, around this notion of money and getting money, and all I want to do is get money, and smoking weed and all of this. These kinds of things which seem to do nothing but present Black men as purveyors of pleasure. But I think that's a direct connection to enslavement, because I think, quite frankly, enslavement was an aesthetic enterprise. As much as it was an economic enterprise, it was an aesthetic one too. I am more and more convinced, the more I study this topic, that not every slave, not every African who was potentially enslaved was brought here. I think those Africans were brought here who whites could imagine would be serviceable to white sexual imaginations.
Oh, wow, that's powerful, man. I mean, talk some more about that. I mean, your work, I'm thinking now about the coming in particular, and this question of desire, this question of this kind of white gaze and the Black response to it. Where have you found evidence of that? Where do you find evidence of that in the historical record, given, I'm thinking about your first book, Dismantling Black Manhood, for example. I mean, did that jump out of the archives that I mean, what kind of examples did you see of this type of behavior and this type of desire, this white desire?
It did, and in fact, what's interesting, Doc, is, of course, I combed through slave narratives just over and over and over and over and again. But the other thing that I read a lot of in graduate school was what I called free narratives, and that is the narrative of Black men during the antebellum period, but they were not enslaved. And looking at these narratives, whether slave or free, the thing that stood out most in my mind is these men's absolute preoccupation with the notion of maintaining manhood, which meant in my head that manhood was slippery, that it was not something that was firmly held or firmly grasped. It was something that men could lose. And I was very interested in this notion of how does one lose one's manhood? Like if you're an adult and you're a male, how are you ever not that, you know? And I began to see that we began, once we encountered this place called the diaspora, to accept and to embrace notions of manhood and masculinity that had to do far more with performance than being.
Let me ask you, Doc, in a couple of minutes we have left, I really want to turn now and continue this conversation in asking you this question. What do healthy relationships for our people look like? I'm thinking particularly now about your work around rites of passage with Ndugu and Nzinga. You know, what does it look like to engage in that kind of recovery or repair? Or is it even about recovery and repair? I mean, if manhood or womanhood can be lost, how do we regain it? Or is even regaining the question? I mean, how do we now move forward into creating these healing spaces and ultimately these whole human beings that you've been talking about in your work? And
Sure, that's a very complicated question, but I think the simple answer I could give in the amount of time we have is that I think we need to reclaim the power of touch. I think one of the things that has not happened since the Middle Passage, literally since we were forced to lie on top of and next to and alongside each other, I think that we have avoided in many instances touch unless it was violent or sexual. And one of the things I would love to help us as a people do is to reclaim the power of our own bodies, to reclaim the power of our own our own spirits, to reclaim the power to touch and love each other just as human beings who deserve to be honored. Not because I'm trying to possess you, not because I'm trying to consume you, but just because I'm trying to acknowledge that you are magical and you are wonderful and you are Black and you exist. And so I think this notion of what it means to touch one another, it seems so utterly simple, but I really, really believe that we are touch deprived to the extent of it being pathological. I think we literally rob each other of touch. I think we steal it from each other in ways in order to stay alive. But those ways we do it tend to be very volatile and very violent. We can do it on the basketball court. We can do it on the football field. We can slap one another in terms of fighting. What we cannot do is hold each other tenderly. What we cannot do is hold each other's hand and share ideas together. All of that is taboo. But the reason I think that is taboo is because that looks too much like a human being on a Black body.
that is very interesting, particularly when, you know, all of us traveled in the continent and we see touch is much, much more free. Particularly between, it's very interesting to see men holding hands, women holding hands. It's not a sexual thing, you know, people very sexually. And we do touch, but it is a difficult thing to navigate. Listen, brother, we're very happy that you joined us for this segment, and we certainly encourage you to continue with your work. We're looking for your next book. And we continue to teach the coming in your other books around the country. Thanks, Dr. Daniel Black.
I appreciate y'all. Thanks, Dr. Carr. Talk to you soon.
Yes, sir.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment. All right, folks, that's my friend, Gerald Albright there. We're going to be in Cabo, November 7th through the 11th for the second annual Life Luxe Jazz Experience. It's an unbelievable lineup of folks there, 14 different acts, including Gerald Albright, Alex Bunyan, Raul Madan, Shalea, Roy Ayers, Ernest Quarles, Johnny McClurkin. It's going to be an unbelievable gathering there. Of course, if you want to be able to go to lifeluxejazz.com, lifeluxejazz.com. But if you can't make it there, you can still get your live stream pass, courtesy of gfntv.com. That's GFNTV.com. Live stream pass, $10.99. You'll get access to all 3 days, 14 different acts performing at the Luxe Jazz Festival. And again, the website you want to go to is GFNTV.com. Would love for you to check it out. I'll be broadcasting Roland Martin Unfiltered from there on Thursday and Friday. And again, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, you can check out all of the fantastic concerts there at the second annual Luxe Jazz Experience, LIFELUXEJAZZ.com. And of course, to get the live stream pass, GFNTV.com. Now back to your Roland Martin Unfiltered video.